let me show you something I think you're gonna like. So I've been out here this morning and installed me my first fender on here. What do you think of that? Yeah, I'm thinking that looks pretty doggone good. So we have one more fender to install, and if you want to see how that's done, stick around. We'll put that baby on this trailer. Alright, welcome back to the channel and the build of our teardrop trailer. So today we're going to be installing our diamond plate, aluminum diamond plate fenders. I've already installed one side, and so I'm going to show you how to do that and a couple items that we're going to need before we get started, and then we'll go through the process of how I installed it on my trailer. So without any further ado, let's take a look at some of the items that we're going to need, and let's get to work. Alright, so I purchased the fenders at Vintage Technologies. These fenders are 15 inches in height and 32 inches in the width here at the bottom, and they are 10 3/4 inch wide. And I'll show you how we got those dimensions, but those work perfect for our little project. And to install those, we are going to be using what is called an elevator bolt or a flush bolt, however you want to call it. And we're going to be mounting these from the inside wall and bolting from the outside, and so it gives a flush appearance on the inside, and they work great. Fenders are installed on one side and pretty solid, and I know it isn't going anywhere. So let's go ahead and set up and get this one installed. So while the wheel is on the trailer, now I already knew this dimension, but just in case you want to size a fender to your wheel, to the widest point I took a measurement and put a little mark on each side. So I'm using a square, put it on the widest part here of the tire, and made another mark. Then using my tape measure from that mark here on this edge to the other side, I know that the width of my wheel, my tire, is 27 inches. So 27 inches, and the fender is 32 inches. That leaves me 5 inches, pretty much a gap. So I want an even gap all the way around the tire. So 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. So I cut me a couple of, well, I cut me 6 blocks, stapled them together 2.5 by 2.5, and we are going to mount these on the tires using some tape, and then we will set the fenders in place, and this will line us up because we have to notch out here on the inside for our aluminum trim that runs on the bottom of the trailer. So let's go ahead and get our blocks mounted onto the tires, and I'll show you what that looks like once those are installed. Alright, so very simple. I just took my 2.5 by 2.5 blocks and used a little bit of tape. I just kind of taped those in position, one on top, one on each side, and that should give me the clearance I need. So let's go ahead and set that fender in place, take a couple of dimensions, and then start marking for where we need our notches for our aluminum trim. Alright, so we're going to take our fender, set it in place here, and it's touching on the top and bottom, and we can rotate it and still keep our 2.5 inch distance away from the tire. Now what we need to do is make sure that the distance from here on the back of the trim down at the bottom of the fender is the same on both sides, and it should be around 2 1/8, if I've got it right. 2 1/8 there on the back, Got a 2 1/16 on the front, so we'll just bring it up just a little bit. We just want to get this thing centered. And right there is our placement. So let's step back and take a look. Alright, I think we got a good placement. 2.5 inch clearance all the way around. So next what we need to do is get inside here and let's see if I can find it here. We need to get the mark it here for our notch so we can get this edge back against the trailer. So we're gonna take a felt pin, we're gonna mark that where that notch is, and then we're gonna go ahead and trim that on both sides, and then we'll set it back in place, make sure it sets in there flush against the wall, and then we will come back, punch a couple of holes here, one on each side, and we'll temporarily fasten it with some short screws, and then we can mark for where our holes are going to be that we need to drill through the wall. Alright, so basically all I'm doing is just take a marker and just kind of eyeballing it where we need to make our marks, and next we'll set up, I'm going to use a jigsaw, we'll just notch that out on both sides, and then we'll test fit it one more time. Alright, so we have a nice little clearance for our trim, and looking on the outside we have a little bit of notch, and that's just perfect. Same as on the other side, and our hole will go right into the side of the flooring. So we're going to go ahead and pre-drill those and mark for our other holes. Sorry if it's windy. And then we'll go ahead and probably drop the tire once we get these holes marked, and then we get things fastened on. We'll take a look. Now before we drop the tire off, we want to make sure and mark our holes, because once we get the tire off you won't be able to locate that fender. So we're going to go ahead and mark this hole, and I think on this side I'm good, so I'm just going to put a little dot in here somehow, and there. And I'll do the same on this side, and then we can take that wheel off and get these fastened on. Alright, one thing I forgot is we want to make sure and pre-drill all of our other holes first, so when we mount this then we can mark on the side of the trailer where the holes need to go. So I transferred holes from my other side over to where I think that they need to be, to clear all the walls and everything else. Then I'm using my little 1/4 inch washer here. I'm going to center that where I think the holes need to be, and we're just going to make a mark. Alright, now that we've got all of our holes marked where we need them, before we drill them we're going to go ahead and use a punch. And I just want to make sure that when I drill them out, we drill them right where we need them. Good. So the flush bolts or elevator bolts, and that's what you can do a search on. You can find these on eBay. Just type in elevator bolt and get whatever size you need. I don't know what the shortest one is, but these are what I had on hand. I think these are 2-inch. So these are 1/4 by 20, so it's got a 1/4 inch shaft, and I will be using a 17 by 64 drill bit, which is just a 32nd above a 1/4, which when I drill in, the bottom here of our flush bolt has a square head, so when it goes through the wall it seats itself and it won't turn when you're fastening things down, which is pretty handy because you're doing it by yourself. So let's go ahead and get our holes drilled with our 17/64, and then we can set that up there on the side of the trailer. Alright, now that our wheel is off, we're going to go ahead and pre-drill the 2 holes that we marked that we're just going to temporarily fasten the fender on. Now we'll set the fender up there, fasten those 2, and then we can mark the other holes. We'll pull the fender off, and then we'll pre-drill all of our holes, and then we're ready to install. Now we're ready to start marking some holes. Alright, so when we do this, we just want to make sure, try to get as much in the center as we can. And just like so. Okay, now we'll take that back off, pre-drill our other holes. Now it's kind of a good idea at this point. I used a small drill bit, punch my holes, just kind of drop a few measurements to make sure that I've got clearance inside and out, and I know that I do. So this hole is going to come on the inside right here, and that leaves me enough room for my flush bolt, and on the inside I clear the bulkhead. So now that I know that I'm happy with my holes here, we can go ahead and use a 17/64, and we'll go ahead and finish our holes. Then we can put in our flush bolts. Alright, so on the inside you can see that we now have holes going all the way through. So we're just going to simply take our flush bolts. We'll just go ahead and insert those. And we'll tap those in here in a little bit. And we'll get those seated. So the main one is the back one, and I'll show you what we have to do for that. So the back one, when we put it in, we're going through a piece of 3/4 inch plus the wall with its thickness is 3/4 of an inch. So it only sticks out about that far. So we're going to go ahead and put our washer on there, put a nut, and we're going to tighten that down and draw that in so it seats itself from the inside.
So from the inside, we can see that the flush bolt has seated itself into the wood, so it's not going to rotate when we put our fastener on. So we're going to go ahead and get our fender on, line up all the holes. We'll put our 2 screws back in place. We'll tap in the other flush bolts so they seat themselves. And then comes the long part of putting all the nuts on. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and place this in place. And this is the tedious part because you're doing it with one hand. You need to line up all the holes. Then we'll go ahead and fasten. I'm using 1 1/4" truss head screws here on the bottom. Get those in place. Now we'll tap in those truss head screws. We'll get the nuts on. Alright, so we just want to tap these into place. We don't want to hammer the heck out of them. We just don't want them to spin when we go to put the nuts on. Alright, so those are set, and they're not going to turn when we go to put the nylon lock nuts on. So that's the longest part because a ratchet wrench or a socket won't fit on these nuts, so you have to turn it one little bit of turn at a time. And when you're talking about a 1-inch protrusion out here, it takes a little bit. So let's take a look at what we got. Let's do it. So the first one's the easiest because it's the shortest. Get that on. Put our nylon lock nut on, and slowly start tightening these things down. And we want as tight as possible without turning the flush bolt. Beautiful. Now I have 4 more to do. These are going to take a little bit longer, so we're just going to go ahead and get things started. And I won't bore you with tightening these things down. I'll show you what it looks like afterwards, and then we'll get that wheel mounted. Alright, so we have all the nuts on our fasteners here. And I'm not worried about the length because we're about this far away from the tire, plus the tire is about out here. So if that tire hits those bolts, I got more problems than just long bolts. But I could come back later with a cut-off wheel and trim those, but we're going to see how well it handles and worry about that later. So right now we are pretty solid. I could probably stand on that thing and not worry about it going anywhere. So let's go ahead and get the wheel on here. Alright, just a real quick shot here before I button the inside up because I got to do a little vacuuming. Flush bolts, nice and flush, nice and straight, both sides. So that's what it looks like from the inside. Mattress comes up to about right here, so you know, only a couple of heads are going to show, and I can live with that. Awesome. Well, let's get this all vacuumed up, cleaned up, and we'll take a look at the trailer. Alright, let's take a look at it with the fenders on. We'll just do a quick walk around here. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. I'm liking that a lot. So that's one side. And like I said, they're pretty solid. I could probably stand on them, but I won't. And the other side. So they are attached really well. And then the fasteners inside, you can only see the top 3 on each side. Nice. And that is how we install the fenders. Alright, so we got those fenders on, and it was a hot one today. Nice and sunny. Wearing my sunglasses, so I probably got, yep, raccoon eyes. Oh well. So, fenders are on, everything's in place, so that's a done deal. With the exception of, now we still have to run some Pro-Flex around and seal everything up to make sure that no water gets in behind into the fastener. So I'll probably do that off camera. You've seen me run the Pro-Flex, so I'll tape everything off like I normally do, run a bead, use my credit card because I'm out of cash, and then we'll call that good. But there is one more thing we need to get done, so let me show you what that is. Alright, so with the fenders out of the way, the last little item is our battery box. So, RV lock box. It's a very good box. The top slides out instead of opening, so you don't have to keep it so far away from the trailer. And it also comes with a couple of little knobs here that we can put a lock on and keep everything secure. So I do have it centered where I want it on the trailer. I have it about the distance where I would like from the front of the trailer. So now I'm going to mark underneath where the trailer frame, and then I'll pull that off, and from the bottom we'll go ahead and punch some holes. We'll set everything back in place, line it back up, and then we will use some self-tapping screws. I've got some 1-inch stainless steel self-tapping screws that we can use. I think their self-tapping screws are a little short, so we're gonna go ahead and secure that to the frame, and then we can call the battery box done. And eventually I'll get a battery installed. We'll put one of these fittings here on the side that we can make a connection from the box to the trailer, and we will have power. So let's get set up and get this thing installed. Alright, so while the box was sitting on the frame, I went ahead and marked out where the frame line is, and I went ahead and marked where we are going to put some self-tapping screws to hold things down in place. So next we're going to go ahead and drill these, and then we'll set it back onto the trailer frame, mark those holes, then we'll take the box off, pre-drill the frame, put everything back in place, and then use those self-tapping screws to secure it in place. Now I like to pre-drill it so I'm not sitting there for 10 minutes doling out a screw. That trailer frame's 3/16 of an inch thick, so let's give it some help. Alright, so after drilling the box full of holes, set the box back on here, and we marked for each hole. So now we're just going to take a drill bit, just slightly smaller than the self-tapping screws, and we're going to go ahead and punch some holes, and hopefully we can get that box fastened on there. Now with all the holes drilled, let's take and line our box up on our holes. Make sure we got it right distance where we need it. There. So that's going to work. So now we can just put the screws to it. Alright, handful of self-tapping screws, stainless steel. I'm using a 8mm head for the socket, and let's go ahead and put these on.
Alright, after a little bit of work and busted a couple of screws, we're now in there. And it works pretty good. Sweet. So our battery box is installed. Next, we'll get a battery, we'll make our connections, and then we've got power into the trailer. Sweet. So we got some stuff accomplished today. Fenders on, battery box installed. I think it's looking good. Alright guys, that's going to be a wrap for this video. And we've got one more task completed, one step closer to being finished. We have the fenders installed, and we do have the battery box somewhat installed. I'll tell you what, they don't make screws like they used to. I'm probably going to end up drilling a couple of holes and through bolting that through the frame. I can't, man. I tried not to break a head off the screws, but nearly every screw I put in that thing within a quarter of an inch were snapping, no matter how easy I took, how large the hole was. So cheap grade frickin' fasteners. Ugh, frustrating to say the least. But at any rate, I'm probably just going to drill 3 more holes in there, through bolt all the way through the frame, put a nut and screw, washer on the bottom, and call it good. As it sits, I don't think the battery box is going to go anywhere. There's probably 3 screws holding it out of 8, and I'm not comfortable with that. So we're gonna fix that. So I'll do that behind the scenes, but the battery box technically is installed. Now, what we're going to do next, I believe, I've been thinking a lot about our stove. So I do have some fittings and plumbing, the ideas that I'm going to do, and I've got some hose coming along the way. Do have a bracket for the 5-pound propane tank that we're going to be installing on the side. I still have to get the propane tank, but I think that'll be our next big project, is go ahead and let's get that stove going now that the fenders are on, because I didn't want to do the stove before I had the fenders on because I wasn't sure where the fenders were going to go. So now that that's done, we can get this stove out of the way. So we'll do the stove, and then we still have a little bit of a wiring that we need to do here in the back to make sure that our lights for our hatch has an on and off switch basically. And then last but not least is the trailer wiring itself. So I do have all the lights that I need, and we just have to get those installed. Then I think it's just a few touch-ups here and there, a little bit of varnish, it's a little bit of sand job, and then we can trick it out and we can take it on the road. So we're real close now, and summer's here. I'm getting excited, so I'd soon hook it up right now and just drag it out. But we still have a little ways to go, but we're going to get it all done. And hopefully you're following along. If you got the plans or you're building your own, you got some tips and tricks that you learned along the way, or at least some fresh ideas that you're like, oh yeah, now I know what to do, and you do it your way. So that's the cool part. So at any rate, if you're building along, you should at least be at this stage here, if not already finished, as some of you have pretty much passed me up since I've started, and guys have already been building theirs and done in 3 months. So yeah, it's coming along, slowly but surely. Alright, well, as always, I want to thank you for watching the videos. Thank you for always tuning in on the channel. That means a lot. And if you haven't already, give the video a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you're not a subscriber, and hit the bell notification for those up and coming videos. Once we finish this project, I'm sure, I don't know how long it'll be, we're going to do another one. I have a couple of ideas in mind that I'd like to get done. And so those are going to be in the future, so you don't want to miss those. And also down right below the video is a new button that YouTube had come out with. It's called the applause button. Click that and see what you think of that. And anyway, also I think if you don't see the little icon up here, there's a link for how you can acquire the plans to build your own teardrop. And you're not going to find another one on YouTube yet. Step by step I show you how to build the teardrop, and along with the plans you'll be able to build your own. And it doesn't matter your skill level. If you've never even cut a piece of wood, I am confident that you are more than capable of doing this little project. So I believe in you, and therefore you should also. So with all that, I'd like to say once again, thank you every one of you for watching and all of your comments and support. Appreciate it very much. And you know what I'm going to say, right? You better stay tuned.